There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. We are so excited to kick off this child abuse prevention series. We're calling it the Champion for Children webinar series. And today we are kicking off with this special talk on child abuse prevention and the role that you can play in helping to prevent child abuse. So my name is Kaley, and I am Thornwell's Program Marketing and Recruitment Specialist. And I am so excited to be here with Katie. So
Well, Kaley, thanks for inviting me to join you
yeah.
in this discussion. My name's Katie Brophy, and I'm the Senior Director of Clinical Services for Thornwell. So I'm glad to be here for Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Yeah. And Thornwell has a long history of being an advocate for children and for families, and really being involved and engaged with prevention. So can you tell us a little bit about
Sure.
Thornwell's history?
We do. We have several programs that really focus on prevention. We have our Strengthening Families program, our Building Families program, and then we have a training that we offer called Darkness to Light. So in our Strengthening Families program, it's like a group parenting education program where we bring parents and children together and give them an education piece, and then let them work together in groups to work out some of those issues. We have our Building Families program where we have licensed therapists that go into homes and provide individual and family therapy to help mitigate some problems that families may be experiencing. And then we have our Darkness to Light, which is a curriculum on sexual abuse prevention that we can offer to groups.
Yeah, I know I sat through that with you as the trainer, and that really was eye-opening. That was a big part of kind of my education in child abuse prevention and the role that I can play not only in my own family and my own community, but really keeping my eyes open overall.
Yeah.
So I think that there are so many things that Thornwell does. And these sound like just support programs, but really they're an important piece of advocacy and prevention.
Sure. I mean, Thornwell cares about prevention because for years, our facility had lots and lots of children that came to Thornwell to live for long periods of time. And that's changed. The child welfare system's changed. And what we've seen is that it's better to prevent a problem than to have the end result, which is children ending up in foster care and being abused and experiencing those things that happen that result in removal from homes.
And as a foster parent for 5 years, and now as a guardian ad litem, I know even in my personal life, seeing the impact of abuse and neglect in a child's life, in a family's life, and kind of how that ripples out to the community. I mean, the trauma really is long lasting, and it has this incredible impact. These young people and these families that live, that there are neighbors, and we may not even know that it's happening. So this prevention is so important.
It really is. It really does impact communities. And we're going to talk a little bit about the statistics and the long-term impact as we go through this discussion today. But it is long lasting too for the individuals and the families.
So April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and that's really kind of what inspired us to start this series, to engage the community, to engage our friends at Thornwell and beyond in talking about matters of prevention. So April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. We celebrate this each month as a reminder and sort of a prompt to be thinking about what is the role each community and each community member can play in preventing child abuse. So you may see child abuse prevention signs and maybe commercials. You may see people planting pinwheels, or these cute little pinwheel pins that Thornwell has this year, thanks to SC Children's Trust. But prevention is important, and that's really the priority in what we're talking about and focusing on, because it's intervening, like Katie said, before a crisis happens. It's checking those red flags, or looking, for signs that tell us that, something might not be wrong now, but we may be heading down that road. And I think of it the same way, like I take my son to wall child visits. It doesn't mean he's sick, but we're looking to prevent the impact of long-term health effects,
Sure.
negative illnesses or health, things that we can prevent or mitigate if we catch them early.
Yes.
It's the same thing with child abuse prevention. We can look for those signs, we can intervene, we could connect with resources, and advocate for something different, something better, a better way forward for a child, for a family, whatever that may mean. And that's why it's so important. It matters because we can stop these things from happening or mitigate the impact if we
Yeah.
catch it early enough. Because, like you said, trauma is so long lasting,
Sure.
and the outcomes are so negative
Hmm.
for the child, the family, and the entire community. And
Yeah.
so, why wouldn't we focus on prevention?
Right. The other thing is if a child has had an impact of child
Mhm.
abuse or neglect, we can prevent another one.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal
Mhm.
by giving that child the ability to respond in a different way when something else happens in their life.
Yeah. So the community, what is your role? What is your response? That's what we're talking about today. And there's not one answer. There's not an easy answer. Certainly, it's not as simple as giving you a formula to follow. But really, what this comes down to, I think the easiest way to sum it up is being a good neighbor.
Yeah.
What does it look like to be a good neighbor? What does it look like to keep your eyes and ears open, to act preventatively with your own children, with your neighbors, with the people in your community? How can you be a good neighbor? Because we're stronger together. And I think, a lot of times we have this idea of like, well, I don't have the credentials to end child abuse. And of course, alone we don't.
Right.
But we're stronger together, we're better together. And when we take a community approach, a collaborative approach, we're so much stronger, and our efforts can produce so much more
Sure.
when we do it together and when we're looking out for each other.
Oh yeah.
Um, it's not a matter of, hey, you need to do all of these things. It's your responsibility to, do all of the things, because we all have our limits, we all have our, capacity. But by being a good neighbor, you might change one child's life, and isn't one child being abused or neglected is too many. And if you can intervene early, what a difference that makes.
Oh yeah. I agree with you, Kaley.
Yeah. And so why do we need to prevent abuse? Because abuse is not something anybody wants for children. But what is really interesting to me is how often we don't know what's happening in our own communities. And so, did you know that last year there were 11 child fatalities in South Carolina alone at the hands of a caregiver? That's amazing. I had no idea, that these things were happening to children in our state, in our community.
Yeah.
And, fatality certainly is incredibly significant. It's the worst thing that can happen, but and 11 is far too many, right? Way too many. But we have nearly 4,000 children in foster care due
Right.
to abuse and neglect in our state. That's today. There are 3,796 children and youth currently in foster care because they experienced abuse, neglect, or abandonment by their caregiver. And that's 3,796
Individuals.
individuals, real names with real stories that we'll likely never know. Not that many too many.
And you know what, Kaley? I can tell you because I worked with children in foster care for
Mhm.
30 years when I worked at social services. That number hasn't really changed all that
Yeah.
much. I mean, it's pretty consistent that that's the number of kids that have been
Mhm.
in foster care. Of course, it fluctuates a bit,
Mhm.
but that it's a significant amount all the time.
Yeah. I looked up the numbers today. So as of today, there are 647 children in foster care in Richland County alone.
Wow.
In one county. Now that's our largest county, but that's 647 children in one community. These are children that go to school with your children or grandchildren that maybe are riding their bikes through the streets in your neighborhood one day and gone the next. These are children sitting in that church pew across from you. These are children just like your own, and often we don't know these numbers. We
Right.
don't know, so in Greenville County, there's 418 children and youth in foster care. In this county, in Lawrence County, which is not a huge county, there
Right.
are 124 children in foster care
Wow.
today,
It's
and
big.
not nearly enough foster homes to welcome them,
Nope.
which is a talk for another day.
It is. It is. And we'll have a webinar on
Yeah,
that, right?
yes, we will in just a couple weeks. So if we got 4,000 children in foster care, and we've got an additional nearly 5,000 families working family preservation cases,
Yeah.
which means they have noticed indicators of potential abuse or neglect. Those children aren't in foster care, but that's 5,000 additional children, additional families, that have some indication that something's not right. We're heading towards negative outcomes, negative impacts of trauma. And that's a lot of children and
It's a lot of
families in
children.
our state.
And it can be just families that need extra support.
Right.
You know?
They don't have that community to wrap around them. They
Mhm.
don't have that connection or access to that resource that could change everything.
Right.
And when we look nationally, I mean, the numbers aren't better.
Right.
There are almost or nearly, there are 400,000 children in foster care in our
Country.
our country every year, about, with 100,000 waiting to be adopted. These are children who don't have permanent families. They're spending time without those permanent connections.
Right.
With nearly 20,000 every year aging out of foster care without a permanent family,
Yeah.
aging out, often into homelessness with incredibly negative outcomes. And you see those numbers and it's just devastating. So, what if we went upstream and noticed these indicators for abuse and neglect, before they happened, before they spiraled out of control, before that family was in crisis?
Right.
What if there was something that a neighbor could do? What if there was something that a program or a community resource could do, um, that didn't lead to that outcome? And there's no way of really knowing. We're going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
What efforts and interventions work and how much, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Right. You should try, because the impact of child abuse and neglect is tremendous. There are things that happen when a child becomes abused or neglected that disrupt their whole life and their whole system and their whole sense of themselves. So one of the things is, you can look into understanding what ACEs are.
Yeah.
So,
And I probably, 5 years ago, I would have never heard that. I don't
right.
know that I would have known what ACEs were. And so maybe I was ignorant, but I don't know that a lot of people know. Can you tell
Right.
us more about
Sure.
what an ACE is and
And
why we should know about it?
a lot of therapists or pediatricians' offices sometimes use an ACE scoring, which is an adverse childhood event. And so they rate potential traumatic events. There's a checklist that you can just go Google it and look it up. And there are things like, any traumatic event that any child from 0 to 17 might experience. Could be as simple as, and sometimes these are not simple, but a car accident. Just being in a car accident can be traumatic.
Yeah.
But it can be child abuse or neglect. It can also be things like living in a household with someone who uses substances, or living with a caregiver that has a mental illness. Those can cause adverse events for a child.
So it doesn't mean that the parent or the caregiver is intentionally inflicting trauma, or
No.
purposefully inflicting trauma,
Right.
which I don't think that it's very often that it's intentional or purposeful, but like a car accident, that's possibly something that can't be avoided.
Right. I mean, everybody could have ACEs. I have ACEs.
Yeah.
I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Just as we go through life and we experience trauma, we've had death of family members. So that could be an ACE, for some.
Like divorce or living in a single parent family, those are some things that they look at as well, which.
Or growing up in poverty.
Yeah.
So these are things that we could be aware of. And so if you have a neighbor that you know has recently experienced, the death of a family member, you might wonder, oh, I wonder how that's impacting their 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Right. And so they might need additional support. So it's good.
It doesn't mean that their kids need to be in foster care.
Right.
But it means that we can wrap around them with love,
Right.
resources,
Right.
Support.
But part of prevention is just awareness of how things impact children.
Yeah.
And so what happens when a child has a traumatic event, a really traumatic event? They may go into shock and then experience like denial that there's even a problem. And so that's one of the things, like, teachers sometimes will recognize, no, behaviors change, the child changed, their mood has changed. What's going on that's different? And that might be a light bulb to go off, that maybe that family might need a referral somewhere for some extra supports.
Yeah. I know we fostered a teen mom and her daughter, and there were some things for her that she just didn't realize were not helpful, were not positive.
Sure.
She didn't know there was another way. So when we, just intervened and said, have you considered this other way? Or have you considered the way this impacts you? Or can we help you learn this new way? It broke that sort of generational chain of doing it one way and opened up possibilities for another way.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what you're saying is too, is that we have a belief that people can change. And so if we didn't believe that people couldn't change, then we wouldn't be doing this work. Right. And so we know that once you realize that if you do something different, it could change something for your child too, or for your neighbor, or for a relative. So it might be somebody within your own family that you recognize, something bad has happened and maybe they need some extra support.
That education and awareness is so key. I mean, I think of the difference in the way that I parent from the way that my parents parented.
Sure.
Which I had really great parents. I was very lucky, but I parent differently because I have learned new ways.
Sure.
Through friends, through education, through just becoming aware of the way that certain parenting techniques can impact children. It's changed the way that I parent, and hopefully for the better. I guess we'll see.
Yeah. And that's a choice you made and a decision that you made. And parents all around can do the same thing. If they see that something's not working, they can make a choice to do something different in order for their children to be healthier and safer.
Yeah. We're certainly not saying it's easy.
Right. No.
This change is not easy. It can be really challenging, and it makes it, you have to make that choice every day.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about a little bit is trauma. And so, like, if you have child abuse or neglect, or you've had some serious traumatic events as a child, it can create an emotional response that is what we call trauma. A traumatic response to that. It can cause other problems in your life as you get older if you don't get the help that you need. And so it can be, something that develops inside of a person that causes their resilience to be affected. And so everybody's different. You can have two children in the same household go through the same experience, but because one is more resilient than the other, their response is different. And so I think sometimes we tend to compare our children, and that might be something that people want to think about. How much support one child needs or has might be different from what another person has. And so, if we look at trauma that a child's experienced and we individualize that and we make sure they're getting what they need right now, and then that can change over time, because trauma long-term impacts can impact how a child feels about themselves as an adult when they grow up. It can impact their view of their future, their loss of hope for the future. And so if they think that this is it, this is the end of my life, because I don't have any hope for whatever in the future because of things that have happened to me, then they can continue to go down a bad path.
Mhm.
But prevention efforts can turn that around, can mitigate that.
Mhm.
And so getting once we recognize that a child's had some traumatic events that are impacting their ability to respond in a healthy way, we can stop that. There are things the therapist can do to help them,
Mhm.
and not just therapists, but just simply talking to your pediatrician about it and getting some suggestions.
Mhm.
Like we have lots of resources at Thornwell where we've created lists of books that are available.
Mhm.
I know you wrote that
Yeah.
whole thing on books that
Yeah.
help foster parents. Same thing. There are lots and lots of resources out there, and sometimes when we go on the internet and we look for things, it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So, it could be simply a phone call to
Mhm.
somebody and say, what did you use when you were experiencing
Mhm.
this? Or you see a neighbor that's struggling,
Yeah.
make sure they have the right connection to get to the person they need.
And we're going to talk about it a little bit more later, but it can be vulnerable. It can make you feel very vulnerable admitting that you need help.
It can.
And so sometimes that one act of courage in asking for help or seeking help or making a connection can change everything. That one caring adult, that one caring person for the child or the parent.
Sure.
Can really change everything.
It can. I think one of the things about the ACE scores that really made me think about it is that the more ACE, the more adverse childhood events that you've had, the increased chance that it can impact your mental and physical health. So this is lifelong impact. So if you have a lot of adverse childhood events and you don't get the help you need, they have made a direct correlation to long-term health outcomes. And so it's really a big deal.
Yeah.
It's really a big deal.
And you made this point before that it's also really costly. Obviously costly to the individual's well-being, but it's costly to the community as well because
Sure.
intervening too late, these treatment resources are not readily available and they're expensive.
It is. And the research has shown that it's impacted children's ability to stay in school, to finish education, to get through school effectively and in the best way possible. They've made a connection to long-term job stability for adults. So there's a lot of things that if you think about that, that's not just an individual thing, that's a community thing.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about really what can you do? What is the role you can play? And of course, it's not as simple as this, but we're going to talk about listening to children, connecting families to resources, modeling healthy behavior, and reporting child abuse and neglect when you have a suspicion. So, again, we're going to talk about listening generously to children, connecting families to resources to empower them in a new way forward, modeling healthy behaviors, and reporting child and abuse and neglect. So, first, we want to listen generously to children. We can listen generously to children when they tell us their feelings, when they share stories with us, when they disclose experiences. And listening generously helps us to identify potential abuse and neglect, but it also helps us to see that child as an individual, to understand them, what they want, what they need, what they're feeling, so that we can intervene with the child or the family before a crisis occurs. That's exactly what we're talking about. How can we? Yes. I mean, and what child doesn't want to be heard? I mean, this is not new advice,
Right.
but honoring that child as a person, believing them when they tell us stories. And we're going to talk about reporting abuse and neglect. But when a child discloses something to you, you want to believe them. Now, you can tell the difference as an adult between a fantastical story
Sure.
and something that might point to something larger, but believing them, telling you understand, using that language that validates their feelings, that validates their experiences, and asking them how they feel. how did you feel when this happened? Or I noticed you didn't want to hug grandma. Why was that? Tell me a little bit. Did that make you uncomfortable? Asking them to share their feelings with you and honoring those feelings, because if you discredit them, they're not going to continue sharing.
Correct.
And this is for children as young as can, have those words for those feelings, and as old as, as old as your
Yeah,
children get.
sure.
So listening generously and honoring those feelings
Yeah.
can be really important. And I think to me that sometimes feels really simple. Well, okay, I can listen and respond, but that really is important. It really is valuable. And when you're being present with your kids or with children in your care, whether you're a teacher or working in the church nursery or an after school program or whatever it may be, listening intently and generously and honoring those feelings.
Yeah. I think a good rule of thumb is to just make sure the kids know that they're validated,
Mm,
that it used to be the school of thought, the old school way was you need to respect your elders and do what they tell you to do.
mhm,
And kids still need to respect their elders,
Yeah.
but we need to listen to what they say when they
mhm.
say it, because they might be saying something we need to hear.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, creating that community around your child, not just in your home, but that whole community of trusted adults, safe adults, that you can be bold and clear with about your expectations and how they treat your child and how your child will treat and respond to them, setting those clear, bold boundaries,
Yes.
with those, bringing people around your kid that you trust and respect, and they can trust and respect you as well. you know, I think we sometimes feel like we need to be polite as adults too, and we might allow things that make us uncomfortable. And what message is that sending our kids?
Yeah,
Uh,
we definitely need to teach our kids how to create safe boundaries. If you don't feel safe, you
mhm,
need to tell mommy or daddy or whoever the caretaker is. They need to be able to go to a safe person.
mhm,
And then also telling people around us, well, that's just not how our family
mhm,
is. We're not going to allow kids to do X, Y, Z, because for us, that's a boundary,
mhm.
and we teach our kids this is the way we do it. And
Yeah.
like just making it a way that if you model that for your own
Mhm.
children, then they will learn how to keep themselves safe.
Yeah. And we'll send out some links to resources after this webinar, but some books that we really love for parents are The Connected Child and The Connected Parents. You can find those on Amazon. Those are really great parenting tools, resources that teach some practical skills.
Sure.
And then there are a number of books out there to teach children about these concepts of body safety and listening to their feelings, and using safety, listening to their safety feelings,
Yeah.
using their safety voice,
Right.
and talking to or reporting to safe adults. So some that we use often with the youngest kids, talking about your feelings and sharing your feelings and listening to your feelings. What is your body telling you? With the youngest kids, there's a book called The Feelings Book by Todd Parr that I really love. It's super simple, but I love starting there, listening to your safety feelings and sharing those feelings. And then there's a book called Do You Have a Secret? Again, we'll send those out.
Yeah.
Following, but books for kids that just introduce, in age appropriate ways. Okay, listen to your feelings. All right, share your feelings. Okay, use your safety voice, and find your safe adults.
Yeah.
It is not ever as simple as that, but you can build that foundation for more nuanced conversations as they get older.
Sure. And I think one of the things the darkness to light training does, for me anyway, is it gives you the perspective that a lot of victims come forward and they say, these were people my
Mhm.
parents thought were safe adults. And so some people that we might think are safe adults might not be safe adults.
Yeah.
And so we need to be hyper aware of that too. And if a child's saying something, we need to act on that and really be aware of what's going on and be sensitive to that.
So in that, as we listen generously to children, we will be better prepared to recognize those ACEs and intervene.
Yeah, we will.
So the next thing in listening generously to children is creating safe spaces. And by listening to children, you can create spaces that will meet their needs, that will reinforce that they are safe, known, and loved. Whatever that means, whatever that space is, if that's your home, maybe you create a feelings corner, a calm down corner, whatever it is. There's lots of great resources out there. If you are a teacher, what does that look like? Providing those accommodations that children need to feel safe, to regulate, and to then be able to re-engage in whatever the activity is. And I think we often don't have the awareness and the training or the resources to do those things as parents, as teachers, churches, schools, whatever it is, but focusing on how can we create this safe space? How can we create a space where kids want to come to school and feel safe to learn?
And I think a lot of schools have come a long way.
Right.
And have sensory rooms or have a guidance counselor that has an area in their room that the child can go to and just calm down, get a hall pass and calm down for a few minutes before they return to the classroom. I think our Building Families program, those therapists go into the home and help parents set that up in their home. So let me help you create a safe place for your child to go to when they start to feel like they're losing their emotions. And instead of having, you
can use that as a parent too.
Absolutely.
Mommy needs time out sometimes.
Mommy needs time out too. That's right.
I probably enjoy time out more than my kids do.
Yep. So what else do we have?
So, we talked about listening to children, but being conscious of those messages that we're using too. So, like you said, it used to be listen to your elders, do what they say. And really that message is not as helpful as we think it is.
It's not, because one time we can say to our child, well, you need to go hug your Aunt Mary, go hug your Aunt, Karen, and the child's reluctant and pulling back is because they feel safe with who they are and who they're with. And by us forcing them, that teaches them to go against what they're feeling. And so we need to just tell Aunt Karen and Aunt Mary, just give it some time and the child will warm up to you, but not force our kids to go and hug somebody they're not comfortable hugging, because that sends them the wrong message and that doesn't validate what they're feeling. I mean, it may just be you have a shy child and that's okay. But it also could mean that, this child for some reason needs to feel that safety and security of the caregiver that they're with. So we need to validate those feelings and just give the child time and tell Aunt Mary and Aunt Karen, you know what? You just give it some time. It'll be okay. And it's not anything against you. But sometimes when we have someone that's coming to us and they're asking about spending time with our kid, it should be one of those red flags that goes off in your head. Well, why would this person want to do that? They may be just a supportive neighbor, and that's great. But let's just make sure about that before we do anything.
So we've talked about listening generously to children, and the next is connecting families to resources. How can we empower families? And really what we want families to be able to do, what we want parents to be able to do, is seek help for themselves, ask for help in their community, because when they get connected to those resources, when they access those resources, we might be preventing crisis.
Sure.
We might not have to intervene with something like removal from the home or safety plan. Because if they access those resources before crisis, they can be empowered to get what they need, to learn a better way. And it may be, okay, they need some rental assistance.
Yeah.
They
Could
need
be.
some utilities assistance, because when they're in such crisis mode trying to survive,
They're not thinking.
clearly about
Yeah.
other things. And so that can be the difference, empowering that family to seek help, to ask for resources, to access resources, and especially free or low cost resources.
Yeah.
And that might be something like building families,
Could be.
strengthening families,
Yeah.
through Thornwell. Certainly in our state, there are lots of resources and programs available. You just have to dig a little to find them.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are out there listening to today, they know of resources in their community.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I met with a woman who that's all she does is
Mm.
post resources on a website for moms.
Yeah.
And just being able to do that and offering that, because people don't know. And like I say, when you just go and start Googling things, you don't know whether those are reputable organizations or not. So how can we reduce the barriers to people getting the resources they need?
Yeah.
So
we're so much more likely to trust a friend or a neighbor who's used that resource or knows about that resource,
absolutely,
whatever it is,
yeah,
than, if we're just doing a quick Google search, which I love some Google, but
I do.
I trust my friend to give me advice because I trust that they care about me.
Yeah.
And so, you might not want to say like, hey, Katie, I noticed, you might need this help.
Yeah.
And because that makes you feel vulnerable, it makes them feel vulnerable. But it's worth it because it could make the difference.
Sure.
It could be something they're looking for and you didn't even know.
And when I work with the foster care program, so when I meet with foster parents, I give them a copy of that Connected Child book, and I'll say, if you're not going to use this, give it to somebody you think might need it, because really spreading the word about prevention is really going to help other people too. And so, as people hear about services and use services, and those services make a difference, they need to talk about it and share that information so that other people can get the resources and supports that they need. School social workers and guidance counselors, pediatricians offices, they're all great sources of resources for families. I think one of the best ones we've got here in Clinton is our nurse at the school. She knows things that other people don't know, and she can point you in the right direction for where to get it. So that's a really
I think most of us can sort of point to someone in our community who just knows everyone and knows everything.
Yeah.
And, just saying, hey, like, I need some help, or hey, I don't know about this, or even like, I'm just looking for a way to connect with other moms.
Yeah.
I think especially as moms, there is a lot of pressure to perform. And so asking for help feels very vulnerable. I'm sure dads feel the same way.
Yeah.
But modeling that vulnerability in asking for help, being authentic in rather than performative in how you're doing, and that nuances of sometimes things are hard and sometimes things are less hard.
Sure.
And just showing your friends and your community that that's okay.
Just saying, I use this service and this was really helpful for my family. And I like this and this and this about it. And then this one, oh, maybe that wasn't so much helpful. But you know what? It might be helpful for your son or your daughter.
And I think the reason that we're really talking about building these connections, facilitating connections as part of being a good neighbor and being an advocate, helping to prevent child abuse, is because when we empower families, when we intervene before crisis, we really are doing the work of prevention. And prevention is important because staying in that family, keeping those family connections, strengthening families is good for the child, it's good for the family, and it's good for the community. I mean, strong families are the foundation of healthy communities. We want to build these families up. We want to focus on strengthening the families so that we don't have to later intervene with things like foster care.
Right.
Removing the child from the home, keeping those family units connected is so important.
Yeah.
So we need that the preventative efforts, the interventions before crisis.
I mean, we want to wrap around a family and
Mhm.
provide them with resources if at all possible, rather than having removal, because removal of a child from a home is so traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the trauma to that child and the parent, the loss of for that child of their community, their
Yep.
family, their support, their connections, sometimes their culture.
Yeah.
And we know we've talked about the number of kids in foster care and the gap in the number of foster homes. Those children might be separated from their siblings.
Yeah.
Those children might be placed
Outside.
counties
Yeah.
away. And so access to their connections, to their community, to their family is so reduced.
Yeah.
So again, if we could intervene before that's even necessary, empower that family, we are reducing the impact of that lifelong trauma.
We are, but we also have to remember that safety comes first.
Yeah.
And kids have to be safe first and foremost. And so sometimes we're not able to do that, but it is always better for them to stay in the home.
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk about is getting involved, taking action. What are some ways that families can do this?
Yeah. So I'm gonna cough again. So families can become foster families. That's one way.
Preventing that continued abuse or neglect.
Yeah. So kids being removed have somewhere to go rather than a office.
Yeah.
Right. Families can consider adoption. They can,
especially we talked about those 100,000 children in our country waiting to be adopted, primarily older children,
yeah,
large sibling groups,
yeah,
children with special needs. So it's this crisis that we don't know about,
yeah,
this crisis of children waiting for families.
yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. We have also have individuals that chose to become guardian ad litems. So they work with that program to be strong advocates for children, to advocate for the best needs of children, whether it's what DSS wants or whether it's what parents want. It's somebody objective.
Who knows the child, knows the family, knows, the community and connections, and can really in court to a judge say, I believe this is the best interest of the child, and here's why. It's a volunteer role in South Carolina. Called Guardian Ad Litem, or GAL, and CASA in Richland County and other states.
Yeah. The other thing people can do is become a volunteer for a children's program. Not necessarily Thornwell, but Thornwell Shore. But also there's lots of programs around the state that people could volunteer to help with children's programs and family programs where they can support those that work to support our families.
Yeah. So you can get involved, you can donate, you can support, you can make these connections, attend trainings like Darkness to Light. There's so many good ones. Going to webinars like this Champion for Children series. But like you said, when it comes down to it, keeping children safe.
Keeping kids safe.
Has to be the most important. So reporting abuse and neglect. What does that look like? I mean, that sounds really scary. Like that sounds like this heavy responsibility that you might feel really nervous to do.
Well, Kaley, I'm a mandated reporter because I am a social worker and I work with kids. And so by law, I'm required to be a mandated reporter. And that means that if I suspect child abuse or neglect, I have a legal responsibility to call DSS and law enforcement to make sure that that report is made. And not everybody is mandated reporters, but everybody can do something.
Yeah.
So if you see something, say something. Yeah. That's the key. If we need to make a report, sometimes there are families that are on the fringes of just being able to survive financially, and we're worried about kids having enough food to eat. I know we have some backpack programs in different schools where we send home food on the weekends. I mean, that's a reality in South Carolina, and we have to look at that. But there might be families that we're worried about those kids not getting enough food or medical care or having a stable home environment. And you just need a reasonable suspicion to be able to make a report.
Yeah.
Reporters are anonymous,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things that's required by law, that DSS keep the reporter anonymous if you're acting in good faith.
Mhm.
And so not every report ends up in DSS is coming into my life and taking my kids out. It
Mhm.
may end up in DSS helping them to get services that they need.
Yeah.
There are prevention programs within the Department of Social Services to help send and direct families in the right way so that
Yeah.
they can get some help prior to even consideration of removal.
Yeah.
So
You told a story about being in Walmart
Mhm.
and the woman in front of you was having trouble with her kid. Can you
Yeah.
tell us kind of
Yeah.
what that looked like, and then how do you make that decision of what to do next?
Sure. So we've all been in the checkout line and seen that meltdown. And I think the way a parent reacts to the meltdown and the way they handle that situation really can make a difference between what their children learns from the situation or their children get worse from the situation. So when I'm in the checkout line and I see a parent struggling, I might make some funny faces to the child to try to distract them from whatever it is that they're wanting to get. Or I might say something to mom like, hey, can I help you carry your bags? Or is there something I could do to help
Yeah.
you with this situation? Because I don't want to make a report. But when I see a parent hit a child in front of people in Walmart, I have to say something, and I have to say,
Yeah.
listen, you seem a little stressed out. Can I help you today? Or is there something I could do? And none of us want to be in that situation, but parents sometimes feel on the spot. They know people are looking at them, and they know that they're out there on their own sometimes, and they might be on their last nerve.
Yeah.
And
I think most of us have been there.
let's just give
Yeah.
them an out.
Yeah.
I have picked up my kid and walked out of the store and left the cart if that need be.
Yeah, it was just last week or maybe the week before that someone was telling me, I was in Walmart and, I saw this mom just hit her kid, across the face. And I think everyone, I think it's normal to sort of freeze
Yeah,
and say, oh my gosh,
sure.
what is my role here? Like,
Yeah,
do I intervene and will that make it this worse?
yeah,
Is it my responsibility to call DSS? What information do I have to
Yeah.
provide? Is it the Walmart cashier's
Yeah.
responsibility to do something? Is it, whose responsibility is it? What do I do? And you just freeze and then you think about it later. And that delay is really normal, but it may not be helpful.
Right.
And so I think talking like this, okay, here is what you do. And at this point, where you have nothing else to do to intervene before crisis,
Yeah.
we need to be making those reports. And how do we do
Sure.
that? So
Yeah.
the number, the 24/7 line in South Carolina is 1-888 care for us. 1-888 care for us. That's the DSS report abuse and neglect hotline. Obviously, if it's an emergency, call 911.
Yeah.
If they are in imminent danger, call 911.
Right.
And then DSS on their website also has a non-emergent reporting tool that you can use.
And they're available 24/7, 365 days a year. And they'll determine if an investigation's needed, and they'll take it from there. And I think the thing is that we shouldn't look at this as a negative all the time. We should look at this as a way that we can support families and get them the help they need. Because if I saw somebody slap a child across the face, I would suspect that that's child abuse.
Right.
And I would have to report it. But you might not have to.
Right.
If you're just somebody walking around in Walmart. But what's the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And what is best for kids?
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you prepare yourself to act in the way that you want to, the way that you believe is right or
Right.
just,
Yeah.
or, you know, because when you're in the moment and you
It's
have
different. It's
that
different.
flight, fight,
Yeah.
freeze,
Going on
what
in your brain. Yeah.
what do you do? And I think knowing again how you can report, how you can intervene, having those conversations, thinking through it ahead of time,
Yeah.
is so helpful in preparing to be in that situation. And hopefully you never are.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that one of the things is recognizing that something's getting out of control. Like
Hmm.
when I see a parent struggling, can I help you put your stuff on the,
Hmm.
let me help you. Let me
Yeah.
help you with this. And that kind of diffuses the whole anger
Hmm.
situation because what happens is the parent feels like they can't control the situation and they don't know what to do.
Hmm.
And maybe they're there by themselves and they got a couple kids.
Yeah.
And you might say to the older child, come on, help, let's
Yeah.
go, help,
Yeah.
let's help mom,
Yeah.
and try to be playful in your engagement so that mom doesn't see it as a negative
Hmm.
intervention. I say
Yeah.
mom, but it could
It
be
could be anyone.
grandpa,
Yeah. Yeah.
it could be anyone.
Yeah. So I think as we wrap up talking about reporting, remembering that you're not the one making the judgment call on if this is abuse or neglect. You're not the one making the judgment call on this child being removed from the home. You are just sharing information with a team that has a process to investigate.
Because you're concerned about kids.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And that's the key, is
Yeah.
just feeling confident that you can make that report, knowing the ways to do it, and letting the state, letting the process, you know, do their job, and they will investigate. They will make those decisions. That's not your responsibility.
Right.
But you can keep making those reports, even if you see continued patterns of suspected abuse.
Yeah.
Because DSS or the state, whatever your government agency is, needs to know, hey, this is repeated
Yeah.
disclosure. This is repeated suspicion. This is, repeated over time. This is a pattern.
Yes.
This isn't a one-time thing.
And once they see that repetition of reports, that does change the
Hmm.
way they respond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have talked today about listening generously to children, connecting families to resources to empower them, modeling that vulnerability and authenticity, getting involved, and making reports. So as we wrap up, Katie, some easy ways to get involved, to get connected and show support for Child Abuse Prevention Month. We talked about the pinwheels being the sign for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So you can plant a pinwheel garden. We see a lot of these around campus at Thornwell.
Yeah.
I've got some big colorful ones at my house.
Yeah.
You can order these on Amazon, or you can get them probably at Hobby Lobby, Walmart, Michael's,
Sure.
wherever. But planting a pinwheel, and I was talking to my kids about this at Spring Festival this weekend. When we put our pinwheel out, it shows other people that we believe kids deserve to be safe. And that's
Yeah.
how we talk about it.
Yeah.
We believe kids deserve to be safe, and we're going to put this out as a symbol, to show other people that that's what we believe. And so when kids and families come to our house, they know
Yeah.
we believe kids deserve to be safe.
Sure. And there's lots of events going on this month for Child Abuse Prevention Month. So, you can attend an event. You can go. We used to do like a balloon ceremony where we let balloons go, the blue and silver balloons. And it was really nice to bring the community together to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We're so glad that you're here. We will stick around and answer any questions that you have either through the chat, or you can use the Q&A feature. But thank you so much for joining us. There are 3 more webinar topics coming up in April and May, and next week we'll be talking about how to talk to children about body safety. We're really excited about that. This Child Abuse Prevention Month webinar will be streamed live to YouTube on Thursday night. Thanks so much, everybody. If there's any questions. All right.
Commented on your story.